Many of you remember a company called Kodak introduced a sound format. The early 90s was all about sound. And if you were in the theater exhibition business, in 1990, going digital meant adding digital sound. People weren't really thinking about the picture in 1990. Kodak came out with an 8-channel on-film digital soundtrack format called CDS. I'm sure quite a few of you remember that. The format itself didn't last very long. I think maybe a maximum of maybe 75, 100 theaters were equipped. But what it did in 1990 was it woke everybody in this industry up, particularly the soundtrack vendors at the time. And it started off a competition of sound formats that certainly lasted all through the 90s. And by 1995, digital sound was pretty well commonplace in the theaters. And I think most of the industry insiders at that time looked at this and said, it's only a matter of time before this whole industry gets rid of 35mm film and changes over to digital. The question was, when would it be and how long would it take and how would it work? Now, even in the early 90s, there was examples of our conceptual models of digital of the future, cinema of the future, this type of thing being demonstrated. None of them came anywhere close to being or meeting the requirements the industry really needed to replace 35mm film with a digital soundtrack. By 95, I think quite a few people in the industry thought that the changeover to digital would be inevitable. The debates behind the scenes were how long would it take and who would it be and how would it all work. It wasn't a question of when it was coming or if it was coming or not, because everyone knew it, at least those of us in the technology sector. Now, the exhibitors weren't looking at it like this. There were quite a few of them that looked at it and said, film is going to last forever, and maybe some don't believe it to this day, but the industry did change it. Around 95, there was no technology anywhere close to being able to put a digital picture up on the screen that looked as good as film. It came out very slowly over the next 4 or 5 years. Progressive demos in Hollywood behind the scenes, starting off with the Texas Instruments showing up. I think it was a super VGA resolution picture that wasn't good enough, but it was good enough to give industry a lot of confidence that within a matter of time this would really happen. The pictures got bigger, the contrast specifications got better, and by 1999, as many of you may remember, 4 theaters in the United States opened one of the Star Wars movies. I can't remember which one. It wasn't the first one. It was the Empire. Episode 2, I think. Right. Okay. Episode 2 opened in 4 theaters in digital. And now that woke the entire industry up. Thanks, George, for doing this. We had people looking at this from all sorts of points of view, from a creative standpoint. Are these pictures good enough? What do we really need? Now, the screenings in 1999 and 2000 were all based on essentially 1K technology, 1.2, 1.3, however you want to say it, but it really clearly wasn't good enough to replace 35mm film in all cases. On a good day, it would look pretty good, but it didn't look good enough. And that word came out from the creative community very early, in say around 2000, 2001, that we really needed something better. And during that period, there was a lot of potential chaos and confusion. People look back at what happened in the 1990s with format wars of sound, having to buy equipment they didn't really necessarily want. They had to make choices they didn't understand. There was a lot of confusion with digital sound that everyone agreed, let's avoid this in changing over everything. We don't want multiple versions of digital cinema. We really only want one version that works around the world, more or less like the 35mm print does. So the industry came together in the early 2000s. We had the birth of DC-28 from SMPTE. We had the birth of DCI, which was the Studio Consortium, to kind of specify their requirements. And things kind of dribbled along fairly slowly during the early 90s. Now, the 1K projectors that started off in those, well, two of the theaters were the TI technology, two of them were the DILA technology. DILA faded away, and TI, with their DLP technology, took the lead role in terms of image. They put 36 theaters out on a prototype basis around the world to just let people get their feet wet. They licensed 3 companies to manufacture these projectors. In the 1K projectors, there was, I think, about 1,000 of those built and deployed around the world. I doubt that any of them are still working. But during the early 2000s, the industry looked at this, and it became clear it had to be 2K or better. They had certain specifications in terms of contrast ratio had to be met, and this was all specified by DCI and working with SMPTE on the standards. So by 2005, things had sort of solidified. We had some early adopters buying systems, but things were kind of taking a wait-and-see approach. 2005 was a kind of a turning point for all of digital cinema. Multiple things happened. DCI finished their specification, and that was issued, and so that gave vendors a lot of confidence, and in fact, there was something to build equipment to. Another thing that happened in 2005 that was kind of strange, which I didn't really expect to happen as much, but 3D came onto the scene. All of a sudden, you could put 3D pictures up that were plausible, where if you tried it with film, it kind of worked, it kind of had some issues, but it worked with digital a lot better. So you saw the birth of 3D, and 3D had a kind of an interesting effect on the deployments. It wasn't economical to look at deploying lots of digital projectors at that time. The equipment was first generation. We saw the first of the second generation equipment in the 2004, 2005 range. But 3D all of a sudden made money. Exhibitors could put 3D in on a theater by theater basis as opposed to equipping all their theaters and actually make those particular theaters pay for themselves. And this had a very good seeding effect on the entire industry. We had, all over the world, 3D became popular in the flagship theaters, and this got everyone up to speed on what a digital projector did, how to put them in, how to train people, staffing. So many of the people who first got their feet wet in digital did it by way of 3D. Now, moving after 2005, things started to happen. Later in 2005, there was one commitment from one exhibitor, Carmike, who bought 2,300 of the first generation projectors all at once. And this is a day that I'll remember, and many of the people will remember, because I think it said this is going to happen for real. When somebody starts ordering thousands at one time, it becomes something we have to take notice of. So it grew from there. It grew from 2005. By 2010, we saw the peak of deployments. Exhibitors were putting these things in by the hundreds. And we were talking about new technologies, live streaming, alternative content. 4K was coming around. 3D was getting a little bit better. We started talking about high frame rates and all the possibilities of what you can do once you got a digital theater started to become real around 2010. And that was 5 years ago, so a lot has happened here. So with our panel today, we're going to quickly kind of pick everyone's brains as to what they thought were thinking at the time and what impact going away from film into digital had on their operations.